the single thing that I'm most proud of, and it's not so much that I'm proud of myself in this, but I'm proud of Fourth Church for doing this, was while I served as the executive director of Chicago Lights, and we transformed what had been the community garden on Chicago Avenue into the Chicago Lights urban farm. In other words, we went from individual plots being gardened by mostly members of the church with a few people from the neighborhood into a ministry that really focused on the neighborhood and the neighborhood people through economic development. And this is what excites me so much about that project. There's an old Chinese proverb many of us have heard, that if you give someone fish, they eat for a day, but if you teach someone to fish, they can eat for a lifetime. And there's been an American addition to that, that if you teach people how to sell fish, then you can help a whole community, transform the whole community. And we have wonderful and multiple mission outreach programs that I think are very good. But what I'm especially proud of and excited about with the Chicago Lights Urban Farm is that it's has a couple of social micro enterprises, like selling. It not only brings the fresh organic produce into a community that otherwise is a food desert, so that's providing fish for the day, but it's also teaching people job skills with the internships for teenagers and young adults. It's providing a place of safety in a neighborhood that sometimes has experienced a lot of gang violence. It's teaching confidence and opening up opportunities for future employment for people. So the teaching how to sell the fish, there's a farm stand, there are alliances with restaurants, not only who purchase the produce, but also provide for the composting that goes on site. And so all of that to me is such an important impact on a neighborhood, and that Fourth Church, instead of expecting people to come into our building for our mission to be performed, we have gone into and provided a physical presence and more in a very important neighborhood for the history of Fourth's mission outreach in the Cabrini Green neighborhood. And even though there were many, many challenges, both internal and external, to that farm getting developed and remaining established, I think it's continued to have a really powerful impact. So I'm really proud of that. I would say that I grew especially in my understanding of and activism around anti-racism. And the two people that stand out to me are two African Americans, Lisa Armstrong, who died very young in her mid-40s, but she, in my first week on the job, made an appointment with me to make sure that I would organize a multiculturalism committee at Fourth Church. And she was a co-chair of that committee for several years and just was persistent in trying to have the committee work to find ways to be more racially inclusive in our ministry and providing a more welcoming culture for African American members or potential members. And her diligence around that at times pushed me, because we were, and I think we probably still are, a 95% white church, and one might wonder why bother trying to change who we essentially are. But she had a vision for Fourth Church not only becoming more inclusive across cultural and racial differences, but also paying more attention and addressing any of those places within the church culture where our members who are people of color may have been marginalized. And so the other person is Robert Crouch, whom I'm very blessed to count as a good friend. But Robert and I went through the anti-racism training sponsored by the Chicago Religious Organization Against Racism. We went through that together with 3 other members of Fourth Church staff. And we were the first team, I think, of Fourth Church to go through that 2.5-day training. And it really opened our eyes and to help us see systemic racism in new ways, and also provided us some tools for how to analyze and notice and try to address wherever there may be some racist practices or dimensions of the culture of Fourth Church that could be changed. And Robert, if it had not been for Robert, I don't believe that we would have formed the Racial Equity Council. He has provided so much steady, consistent, and sharp leadership with patience, but with conviction and commitment. And he's also trusted me greatly by sharing experiences of his own life about what is it like to live being Black in the United States. So I'm very grateful to Robert and to Lisa for teaching me and partnering with me and exploring some unknown new ground to help Fourth Church become more of an anti-racist organization. Well, the memory that popped up prominently when I read that question was related to Dana Ferguson. Mm-hmm. So Dana Ferguson became associate pastor for mission in 2005, and then years later, she became the executive associate pastor at Fourth Church, and she was supposed to be my supervisor when I started in the role as associate pastor for mission. But my first day on the job was her last day, because I only interacted with her as she led a staff meeting on a Tuesday morning. And then that afternoon, she went into the hospital and she died within 2 months. And not only was that a tragic, heavy loss for the church, but I personally was living in a time of a lot of uncertainty and chaos, because I was brand new on the job. I didn't know the church. I didn't have a supervisor to really help me get oriented or even understand what my responsibilities were, because understandably attention was focused on Dana and all of us were, praying for her and grieving for her. And her service, her memorial service is what I'm especially remembering. The sanctuary was packed. Dana was much loved, and she loved many people, and she had a real heart of compassion, especially for mission. And I had heard numerous stories about her, that she was very vivacious. She lighted up a room. She had a love of life, but she had faced cancer earlier, 5 years earlier. And her husband had said that he'd actually been told a couple times before that she probably wouldn't live much longer prior to this more recent 2008 experience. So Dana had an opportunity to write devotions, as all the pastors are invited to do, specifically on, during the season of Easter or about resurrection. And it's unusual to have someone who's died give you their own words of faith in life after death. But we had some of that with Dana. And some of that was certainly in our awareness through the memorial service, but it was still, for me, very sad. She was only 42 years old when she died. There was just such a heavy sense of grief, even during this service of worship. So it was a beautiful service. I'm sure Dana planned it. And John played a beautiful postlude on the organ, as he always does. And I thought that was it. And I was still feeling really heavy about it all, grateful to be sharing in the celebration of her life with so many other people, but still heavy. And then, unbeknownst to any of us, I think, the tower brass started playing "Oh, When the Saints Go Marching In." And it was such a wonderful change of tone, uplifting, celebratory music that it actually made me laugh, because it was almost as if Dana was reminding us through these brass players and that song, life goes on. Resurrection is triumphant. And it was like she got the last laugh. So that's the memory that I have.